looking to buy a home in Rhode Island or any other coastal area, it's super important that you know about flood insurance and what that means to you as a buyer. Rick, if someone is looking for a home that has flood insurance, well, actually, let me just go back. It does affect you too, right? Because they have to factor that into the mortgage.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there is a house that you're interested in on the water, typically I would reach out to Rick, and what would you do from there once I give you the address?
So we would do what we call a flood zone check. Sometimes it's pretty obvious it's in a flood zone. And then at that point, it could be a listing for Rach where she's ahead of the game. She's like, hey, Rick, these sellers don't have flood insurance. They've owned the house for 50 years. They don't have a mortgage or anything. And I'll shop it around, do flood, and we'll give her like a flyer for her open house. This way, every buyer that's walking in knows there's a confirmed number. Yeah. There's no huge thing that, like Adam said, could be a massive problem. We were kind of just getting ahead of the game at that point. Or it could be a buyer. And you're looking at a place, you're like, hey, Rick, going to see this place with this buyer at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Can you look at the flood? The flood really is the biggest, it could be the biggest game changer, I suppose, because if you're on the water, you might get lucky and get a $2,500 quote, or it could be like $10,000.
Yeah, I've seen a $10,000. Yeah, I've seen it
Correct.
before. It's a policy that you need to have. I mean, if it's that at risk, and it floods, you're going to be very much happy that you have it, even if it's as expensive as you mentioned. And for my side of things, it's crucial that we're checking that up front. So every property that a buyer is looking at, if it's close to the water or if it's in an area like Warwick, even if it's not right on the water, there's still plenty of flood zones in Warwick. We'll check on the FEMA website, and if it's on a flood zone, then we'll kick it over to you guys and say, hey, I think this is in a flood zone. Can you tell me what we're looking at for numbers? Because it really can vary. It can be, $500 a year to $10,000 a year, depending.
Yeah, luckily it has gotten a lot easier. I kind of like the intricacies of it because flood's one of those things where there's so many loan requirements. They require different loans, have different types of requirements for flood and stuff. So I got kind of nerdy with that stuff, and I was like, this is how I could stand out, to my people we work with and potentially other people is what type of loan takes this, what's the max deductible on that loan.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff. It's easier now because they passed a law where an FHA loan, you don't have to use FEMA anymore. So that was like the big problem because the people normally using an FHA loan are the people that are trying to get a low down payment, get some assistance maybe.
Yeah.
And that was the big problem where FEMA was always the most expensive.
By like triple.
Yeah. I might have a Neptune flood quote for $500 and FEMA's $3,000.
Yeah.
But they could not do it.
Yeah, with an FHA loan, how it used to be, if it was in a flood zone, it was pretty much a move on type of deal.
And I think at one point too, you weren't doing flood. Like, did you have to go to like a special agent at one time for flood? I thought like early in my career that it was difficult to find an insurance agent. Maybe I just didn't know you then, but would handle flood.
There weren't private markets. We couldn't shop flood. It was kind of like being a captive agent where you only have the one company to shop. That's how it used to be with flood until about, I'd say 6 years ago. So I've been doing it for 8 years. So when I first got in, FEMA was the only option.
Yeah.
And you could go to me for FEMA, go to John for FEMA. It should all be the same rate if we're quoting it the right way.
Every single company would have the same.
Go to Allstate, whatever.
Yeah.
It should all be the same exact rate, no matter what. And then private companies started coming into the market, and now it's just like home insurance. Now we can shop it, auto insurance. You just shop it around now like anything else. Still some things to know as the insurance person with the loan type and stuff, but it's nothing that's too crazy anymore.
Yeah, and from the mortgage perspective, that's going to play directly into the debt to income ratio. So working with someone like you guys, it's not just when the client's under contract that we need to be thinking about this. It's the numbers are tight and we think it's in a flood zone. Before they even put in an offer, we're going to check with you to make sure, is it in a flood zone definitively? And if it is, how much is that going to cost per year for this specific client? Which I know it's not really client specific, it's more about the property, but how much is that property going to cost for insurance, for flood insurance? And then I have to factor that into the mortgage payment. Because when I'm sending the breakdown, I'm quoting homeowners insurance, and I know it for 100% certainty that they're going to be homeowners.
8323.
Yeah. I know with 100% certainty I'm going to be
line
home.
over it.
Yeah.
3333.
Yeah. And but with flood, it's an X factor, so we need to tag you in to make sure that the client can get approved for it, and if they can get approved for it, do they want to be
affordable?
Yeah,
they
is it
want to
affordable?
pay it.
Are they okay with that?
And that is the best part about flood is that it's not client specific.
Yeah.
So we actually have a shared sheet at work with all the producers of flood quotes that we've done because why we're going to go quote somebody already quoted.
Right.
And that's the best part about it where Rach might have her listing. I can estimate a ballpark for home insurance, but we really do need the buyer's info because it could be anything from their insurance score, credit plays a factor, down to
How many dog they have, right?
like the dog, something like that. Those are all like there's so many things that can affect home insurance, and there's nothing specific to a client that affects flood besides maybe if it's not the primary.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's about it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you seen the flood maps? Like, do they vary over time? Well, with like Hurricane Sandy, a lot of houses that I've been selling, because it's kind of like that turnover time now.
Yeah.
Like, oh, have you ever had water in your basement on the sales disclosure? Only in 2010, only during Hurricane
Right.
Sandy. And then I remember when I first started selling, there were a lot of houses that we'd go to and be on a flood zone, and we'd be like, really? Like, we're not really that close to the water. And they said that because of Hurricane Sandy, they really extended all the boundaries around where that
Yeah.
is. Do you know, has that like calmed down? Does it change over time, or is that going to be kind of here to
Good
stay?
question.
Yeah, and they call it the 100-year flood zone. So
100 years. Great.
yeah,
wow.
yeah, they call it the 100-year flood zone. So that's one of those things where
If it's flooded once, it's there.
yeah, if it's a legit, you got more than 2-3 houses getting flooded in that zone, it's gonna probably end up being a flood zone at that point.
Wow.
That's what happened in Warwick with the Warwick Mall and everything.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they used to not be in a flood zone. Now it is, and
Probably makes sense that it is.
yeah, correct. Things change all the time.
Right.
If you ever study climate stuff, I mean, things change literally all the time. You're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, California might be underwater.
Florida's
soon.
brutal. Florida,
You know,
I'm
so-
licensed in Florida, and Florida, almost the entire state is in a flood zone. Even like parts of Orlando that are center.
Yeah,
You know.
it's just more extreme weather.
Yeah.
and it's so consistent down there with hurricane season.
Right.
Well, and I
You know you're gonna get a big storm like probably
Right.
2-3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of changes happened when Hurricane Katrina
Oh, yeah.
too, like with that whole area.
Because it
and
just
everything.
happened to, I was talking to a loan officer from Louisiana last night actually,
Yep.
and he was telling me that insurance, there was I think 16 insurance companies in Louisiana that you could shop to, right? And now there's 3 because they got smoked by the most recent hurricane, and all of them got out of the business. The average insurance cost in Louisiana right now is $7,000. For a regular $300,000-$400,000 single family, he sent me a quote last night. We were joking about it. It was $21,000 for
Wow.
a 3-family in Louisiana that was listed for $450,000.
Yeah, it's
So that's a great
$21,000.
reason to buy in Rhode Island,
Yeah,
Massachusetts,
it
or
is.
Connecticut,
Come to New England.
where we are.
No, it's
Yeah.
true. I talk
It's
about it all the
crazy.
time. I'm like, it's we're knock on wood because
Yeah.
crazy stuff going on all the time in the world lately. But we're lucky with the weather.
Yeah.
we might. I think it was like 2 years ago we got like a little tremor of
Yeah.
something. I think I was playing
Sure.
softball and I was like, well. Thought I got after it last night too much. What's going on? And then all of a sudden it's like, hey,
Yeah.
we have like kind of an earthquake. I'm like, what? What do you mean?
Minor
Yeah,
earthquake.
what do you mean? So we're really lucky with the weather and the things that we bring up about older multifamilies in the city and stuff. It's nothing compared to that.
Yeah.
So small potatoes in reality.
Yeah, like a high insurance quote here, it would be like $4,000. If we see $4,000, it's like, whoa,
Wow.
that's a high insurance quote. But in other parts of the country,
Yeah.
that's the standard for a regular single family, or could be double that.
Or like the landlocked states, their policies are like $500 a year.
Yeah,
Landlocked
that's
in
true.
newer
Parts
developments.
like South Carolina. And new construction, right, is also super cheap on
Yeah.
landlocked areas.
Yeah, and
There's
it's-
not much that can go wrong.
He doesn't say. I mean, and it's things that could go wrong are probably not
Covered by-
insurance related.
Yeah,
it's
covered
probably
by
a
a builder.
warranty or
Yeah.
a builder or something. Yeah, some kind of warranty going on. I think it's a great thing if people buying a home, you've never been in this home, like an American Home Shield type, like a warranty.
Yeah.
I wish we could offer that too, because it really is.
It's like $400 or $500, and it's
It really
no
bridges
brainer.
the gap between what people want insurance to cover and what's actually
Right.
not covered
Right.
for insurance.
Right.
Wear and tear. It's got to be an occurrence. It can't be like, oh yeah, this thing's just been leaking for 4 months here.
Right.
Like what's going on?
Right.
It
Pre-existing condition.
pre-existing condition. So it's one of those things. Well, I wouldn't have bought this house if I knew about this. I'm like, well, the insurance company wouldn't have wrote it if they knew. Which stinks. It's not fun being the guy to
Right.
have that combo with somebody.
Right.
And I'm always like, you could file a claim, but I just know the negative effects of you've owned the house for 2 days. A company legally has 60 days to get off a policy. They could drop you. They gotta give you a 30-day heads up.
Right.
But if you're filing a claim for something that I pretty much know is not going to be covered, and it's really didn't do that much damage to,
Right.
I'm gonna have a real combo with you. I mean, I think that's the whole point of having an agent is
Right.
somebody to have a combo with
Yeah,
instead
the
of just calling a
advocate,
company.
yeah, it's huge.
Because I couldn't even tell you the amount of times people are like, oh, I wouldn't have filed that claim if I knew this kind of thing.
Because
And
then they file the claim, then they get dropped.
correct.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, I get that's the
They
point
don't
of
get the
insurance. Trust me.
claim, and they get dropped.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, that's you just got to have a combo with somebody, and the market's always changing. Like right now is a really hard market. Companies are being really picky, and it's one of those things where if you file that small claim, even if it's not in that 60-day window, what if you actually need this insurance? Now you got 2 in a year. probably going to get dropped, and now we're going to have trouble next year.
Right,
So
right.
that's, I just try to level with people as best I can, and that's kind of like you guys. We're just advisors, and at the end of the day, we're advisors.
It's their decision.
Yes,
but
it's sales, but
it's no, it's
you need it, and I'm advising you on it.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
For any more questions about flood insurance, feel free to send any one of us a DM or ask your question in the comments below.